Hi, friends. This is Pastor Connor. I just wanted to give you all a heads up. We had a little bit of technical difficulties with the recording for this presentation, so I'm going to give a quick recap of the parts that were missed by the recording. We did actually get some good parts recorded later, so I'm just going to recap up until where the recording actually started and then let our presenter, Arkayla, finish from there. So the title slide that we're seeing right now for the presentation is Know Better, Do Better. Basically, the basic idea behind that phrase is that we as a church are recognizing that there is persistent injustice in the world right now. In particular, the injustice that we are focusing on here is racial injustice, and particularly the racial injustices that are expressed through policing and police brutality. So that is kind of the basis of the phrase know better, do better, is now that we know about these injustices, we have to do something. We have to do better. And we do better by doing the work, figuring out what we can do, what our limitations are, and where we could be doing better as well. And that's really the ultimate theme underlying this entire presentation. We'll talk a little bit more about this idea later. But that is kind of the basic ideas present throughout this presentation. So this next slide kind of talks about, or is in reference to the conversation that we had about what we're taught about police. Arkayla asked us, what were the things that we learned about police growing up? What were our experiences in schools, and what kinds of things did we learn about police officers during schools? I lifted up that a lot of, in my experience with police growing up, was visits to schools, career day type things, and then the DARE program, the Resisting Drugs and Alcohol programs that is nationwide, that was facilitated by a police officer. And those types of things. So we really get a very positive, friendly, loving sense of police through how we're exposed to them as children in our school systems. Particularly, though, that experience comes from a very rural Wallingford school system experience where the population is not that diverse. So there's unique kind of threads in everyone's experience based on where they lived, based on the community that they came from, based on their skin color as well. Arkayla, to my recollection, lifted up that her upbringing was very similar in her elementary school days, but then she was very poignant about the fact that when she started to transition into middle school, when she started to look more like a teenager, when she started to look older, the attitudes of police towards her changed. She was treated much more with much more hostility, with much less love and respect that we were taught that police show everybody in elementary school. So the things started to change for her in elementary school, and she talked about the stigma that black teenagers have. Talking about some of the victims of police brutality, or the victims of even just civilian brutality, racist violence perpetrated against civilians by civilians. Because of what they look like. I'm thinking of George Zimmerman, who was one of those people that acted out of a sense of racism and pursued someone and ultimately killed them. So this is the type of framing that Arkayla did in this portion of the presentation, where she contrasted what we're taught about police through the scheduled and scripted interactions that happen with them in certain situations, and then she moves on to what the real life experiences are. when particularly the black community, whom she's speaking for, grows up and starts to transition toward adulthood. So it's at this point that Arkayla kind of transitioned to a few statistics, saying that black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people, and they are also 1.3 times more likely to be unarmed than white people. So there's a vast disparity as well within how the violence by police is perpetrated across race and across the spectrum of people that are unarmed versus armed. A lot of the people that are killed, a lot of the black people that are killed by police are unarmed, while the police kind of perpetrate that they say they are armed and are not. If you want to hear more about that, I would suggest looking into some of the grand jury work and the federal investigative work done on the St. Louis Police Department, who are world famous at this point for being very reflective of these statistics, and as well as planting evidence and weapons on people that they've just killed. And she rounds out this portion with saying that so far in 2020, there have been 781 people killed by police. That's across the board. That's of any race. If you want to do more research, I would really suggest doing that and seeing for yourself what these statistics are and how they relate with other statistics that are not included here. Arkayla continued on to kind of place these stories of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in tension with one another. We talked about how George Floyd's story got way more attention than Breonna Taylor's. And Arkayla kind of lifted up that is a very common trend amongst how the news reports on these stories. They report far more on the black men that are murdered than they do on the black women that are murdered. And I kind of lifted up the fact that, I'd never realized that until Arkayla had called that out, because quite frankly, Breonna Taylor is the only name that I can think of when it comes to this type of situation, because of the people that have kept her name going, kept her story alive, and kept the pursuit of justice for her going. So there was that was a learning moment for me, and we kind of lifted it up. I kind of talked about how this is a derivative of an idea that is called intersectionality, which is the intersection, the idea of intersecting oppressions, where the fact that Breonna is not only black, but she is also a woman, how those two things tend to play into her life experience. Whereas while George Floyd, yes, is black, he's still a man, and there is certain privilege that comes with being male. So clearly that is reflective in how the stories are told on a nationwide scale. Breonna Taylor has seen much more coverage than many other women that have been killed as a result of police brutality. So there is something there that I think is really really interesting in how stories get told, how the media covers these things, where the biases on the media are. And that's something that's I thought was very interesting. And we now arrive at this slide that reads, "We realized as Christians we could no longer sit idly by." This actually comes directly from the current draft of our statement. We as Christians are called to act. We are called to act in whatever way that is. One of the big points that we talk about in this presentation is that action does not look the same way to everyone. There is no one action that will solve everything. The result of justice, the fruit that is produced from that work is a fruit that is produced by the collective works of many. Something that I talked about, I think I'm hoping gets brought up in the recording, is talking about the sermon that I preached that day that in virtual worship, talking about the fruits of our labor, talking about the laborers in the vineyard, that parable that Jesus tells, and how they all work. They all put different amounts of work in, but they all receive the same result, and that result is a single equal form of payment. And that equal form of payment that we're looking for is justice. So I'm going to let the recording now play. That's all I have. So thank you for listening to this recap. I unfortunately will not do it nearly the justice that Arcala could have done, but we just we'll have to deal with that. And thank you again for taking the time to watch this. Enjoy the rest of the recording.
Justice, but I really encourage you guys to reach out to friends at other churches, especially, and let them see the work you're doing and inspire them, because I think that you really have the potential to inspire. And with the potential to inspire and choosing to act, the murals I was talking about, you guys have a lot of Black artists in Connecticut and throughout the area who are painting Black Lives Matter murals, who are taking action, and who could use your support. So in the newsletter that I'll send out later this week, you will get information on how to connect with Black Lives Matter 860. That is a Facebook page and organization of activists throughout Connecticut that I happen to find. And they are doing some great work. They had a Breonna Taylor candlelight vigil this weekend. They are the ones who are responsible for the Black Lives Matter mural. And they have a couple thousand followers on Facebook. So I think connecting with them and getting it out there that you guys are doing this work would be a great opportunity for you. So that's what you can do on the local level. On the national level, I encourage supporting local from afar. Instead of donating to the large Black Lives Matter organization, when a verdict like Breonna Taylor's comes out, you can donate directly to a jail support fund in Louisville instead, if that makes sense. So sometimes with these bigger organizations, what I've learned as an activist and as a Black woman who has put money into them, you don't really see where the money's going. It's not as transparent. But with smaller organizations like a jail support fund and small diversity organizations, the money will go right into the hands of the people. It'll directly help the people. And I know a lot of you guys, as I mentioned with my journalism project earlier, you guys are watching the news. You know when protests are happening in Kenosha. You know when things are getting crazy in Portland. And all you have to do is type in Portland Jail Support Fund. And right there is how you can literally help those protesters get out of jail, go on with their lives. And what I learned, the longer you sit in that holding cell, the more things they do to you. So the quicker you can get access to jail support, the quicker you can get out, and the better it is for these protesters. So that's just an example of how you can hit the local level, how you can hit the national level by making it local from afar. And then on the personal level, taking action personal level, I definitely want you guys to have conversations. Teach your children about race. I know a lot of my white friends, the only thing they knew about race was that they had me as a Black friend. And that was a hardship for me in a lot of ways, because they didn't understand the dynamics of my life in any way, because no one told them. They just saw that I was having hardships or that things were happening to me and maybe thought that they were my fault. But that could have been combated by their parents having open discussions with their children about race. And that is a hard discussion to have. I know, like with my godbrother, my neighbors, the children in my life, I don't know exactly what to tell them about what it means to be a Black child in America. But there are a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of videos, and there are a lot of tutorials that you can literally vet yourself and then let your child watch, so you don't necessarily have to have the right words because someone else does. And so I will link you guys to that. Also use your platform. You guys have a great platform as religious leaders. You can reach so many people as religious leaders, and as leaders in your community. You can reach the newspapers. You can reach, if you find a story that needs to be told, you can get it told. And so I definitely encourage you guys to use your platform. Next, continue your education. Really be careful about the news sources and the research sources that you're using, because they can be pushing a narrative that is harmful to the liberation of Black people. And so I definitely, for instance, a news station that only talks about looting and rioting every time there's a protest, you have to question that, because I believe CNN just published that 93% of protests are nonviolent. So I really encourage you guys to continue your education, continue watching the movement grow through the news, continue your anti-racism resources, but also vet your sources, and really think about what you're looking at. And then lastly, vote. We need to vote this year. There are a lot of people who feel like they don't, and I've had this emotion too. What does voting really do? And it's just picking the lesser of two evils and all of those other things. And regardless of if you believe that we're just picking the lesser of two evils or anything else, it's important to vote, not just in your federal elections, but also in your local elections, because they really, you can demand a lot from your politicians, especially, we talked about it in our last episode, as a white congregation, you guys have a certain level of privilege. Your voices are going to be heard. There's a better chance of your voice being heard if you write a letter to a politician or call their office and things like that. And there's strength in numbers. So I really encourage you guys to vote and demand a lot more of your politicians. I think that that's probably some of the most important things that you guys can do. And there's little steps, and like I said, I'll outline these things in the newsletter, little steps that you can take. So like, you don't have to like teach a classroom of kids about race and pick a brand new news source and go out and get people to vote all this week. I'm not expecting that of you. I'm just expecting you to think about it. Think about, maybe I'll find this resource to show my children or grandchildren. Maybe I'll have a conversation with a friend who attends a different church about this project that my church has been working on. Maybe I'll do a little research about anti-racism resources. You don't have to jump into everything so quickly. But as an ally, I'm expecting you to do something. And I think that having these conversations is great. I think that you guys, like I said, have the potential to make big change. And I think that you guys are all ready. I can tell, I can see like the eagerness to take action. It's like, I can see it in your eyes, I can really tell that you guys are ready to create change. And that's so exciting to see. So I think with tips on how to do it on a local, national, and personal level, you guys are going to be equipped to make a big change. So that is the end of my presentation. The next part was just going to be going through what we had written in our statement, and what words we might want to change. But first, I want to give you guys a second to kind of reflect on what we talked about in the presentation. Ask me any questions, give me any comments, concerns, and things like that. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. When you were saying to write to congressmen and things like that, there's been a number of times I've had students write to congressmen, and they say that they hardly ever get letters from people. So, we may think, oh, they're not going to listen to my letter, but you'd be surprised. I mean, they get so little communication from individuals. They get all kinds of political action committees and all kinds of businesses getting into touch with them, but the individual members of their communities, the voters, they don't hear a lot from. So there's a lot of power in that. And I just wanted to, there's a couple books. I don't know if Arkayla had them, but these two very popular ones, White Fragility, awesome book. This book is a little heavier. I don't know Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Beverly Tatum is just amazing. And then this is another book that I read recently that's Raising White Kids, Jennifer Harvey. And it's subtitled Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America. Very, very good book. very good too. So anyway, just wanted to share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I definitely encourage you guys to read when you have a chance, and audiobooks are great. And just education can happen in so many different ways, whether it's reading a book, going out and talking to an activist, which is hard right now because of COVID. I understand that. You can message. I will send you guys the Black Lives Matter 860 Facebook page. I joined the group and they were fine with me joining the group as long as I'm contributing to the conversation. And so I'm sure you guys could join the group, and that'll give you guys access to when the protests are happening, who needs jail support funds, and who the activists are that you could literally talk to about how your congregation can support them. I can say from experience, a lot of activists right now are food insecure, housing insecure, and that, you know, that's something the church does that. As long as I've been alive, the church helps the homeless. They help the people who don't have food, and this is an opportunity to do what the church does, but also contribute to activism. So I really encourage you guys to, keep donating to food pantries and keep, things like that are really important. And I recommend continuing those.
I'm also hoping, I mean, your idea of the bail out funds, I think that is awesome. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that before, but I mean, there are so many people that are in jail just because they can't raise bail, and it's ridiculous. But then to think about the protesters getting direct funds, I think that's a great idea. So I think we should do that for our missions committee, perhaps for November. Start with that as a mission, instead of having it even just be individuals, have us all contribute to that one thing.
And if you guys want, so another thing that I do is program development. If you need help in program development, like how you want to raise funds, how you want to allocate funds, who wants to be involved in the messaging and things like that, please let me know. I would be more than happy to help. So just keep me updated on that. Does anyone else have anything, yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Well, since I'm always processing behind, I've spent a lot of time since our first gathering thinking about the concept of privilege. And as I go about my daily life, I'm looking at it in a much different way. I've always realized that I've been very fortunate, but when you put the concept of privilege there, so that I think of things as I go through the day. If you have a job that gives you sick days or health benefits, privilege is the zip code that you live in, having access to fresh fruits and vegetables, if you have a bank account, if you have a credit card, all these things as I go through the day, because I realize privilege is nothing I really have control over. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but once you're aware of it, then you have to look at it a little differently. To me, it's like starting a race. You have the start line, and you have people lined up at the start line. There are those who have a lot of privilege. They're even into the race before the race starts. And then there are people without any privilege at all. They're behind the start line. So the race starts, they still have to get up to the start line at some point, so that even through hard work and education and everything else, they're struggling to even get to the starting point. So one of the things I did was I looked at all the nonprofits that I support on a regular basis. And I said, okay, the next check I write, I'm going to specify that I want my funds, if it's for my college, I want it going to a scholarship to help a minority student. If I'm giving to Habitat for Humanity, I want the money to go to a minority household that they're going to get the next house. If it's Heifer International, I always say I want it to go to a program that empowers women and girls. So that's a start that you can make on your own, just saying this is how I want the contribution I'm giving you to be spent. And that has all, I always just gave to these organizations, except for Heifer. I always said women and girls, but the others I never specified, and now I am. So the work you're helping us do that concept of privilege. And I'm not ashamed of privilege, but nothing I can do about it. But I can change now how I use that privilege to help others at least get up to the start line, for Pete's sake, if not get them into the race itself.
So, yeah, sorry, I realized I was muted. Absolutely. So that is an amazing realization. I'm so excited that you are, dictating where your funds go. That's a really good start. And not even a start. That's, it takes people years upon years to figure out that race analogy and the starting line and things like that. I definitely encourage you to think about dismantling, of course the plane goes over, dismantling the systems in place that give you privilege. And I can do an entire conversation about that. So that is voting in people of color. That is giving people of color a seat at the table so that they can be a part of decision making and they can enact policies that even out the playing fields. And so I definitely encourage you to think about restructuring how you can restructure some systems in place to lessen, not to lessen your privilege, but to lessen the burden on people of color. So yeah, you're so advanced, I'm going to give you like the task of dismantling racism, We're just
No pressure, Barbara. It's all on you.
Okay. We got to get the church open first.
You take the baton and we'll follow.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any comments on the presentation? No?
Probably the next time I'll have processed it all through and I'll be talking about this when you're talking about something else.
No worries. It takes me a second to like compute and put things, and I was just talking to my friend yesterday. She was telling me a story, but when people talk to you, it's in their language, it's in their version, it's in their perception. And sometimes it takes a second for your brain to compute it to your language, to your version, to your perception. So I completely understand that. And sometimes it takes me a second too, to put things into perspective. Like I did the flower activity, but instead a race activity with a starting line. That's what you identified with. And I'll use that in the future. It's, if I was able to come out there, I have no idea what that horrid noise is. But if I was able to come out there, I would love to do a privilege walk with you guys. And that is literally where everyone starts standing in the same place. And then I say something like, if you are white, take 4 steps forward. If you are black, take a step backward. And you go through this whole list of things. And then at the end, you see white males are way over there, while black females are way back there. And it really shows just what privilege looks like and how you're literally getting ahead because of privilege. So that's a really good activity to do with middle school age kids. I don't know what your youth programming looks like.
Well, I did a children's message like that in the sanctuary where I had kids going up the steps if they had different levels of privilege, and they all ended up on the top step, and we talked about how, okay, so you have all this privilege, what can you do with that? How can you help pull people up instead of holding people down?
Definitely.
I also wanted to say, Arkayla, that you've had there's another thing that you've had an influence on me. I'm doing an enrichment Padlet for all the kids in our school district, grades 3 through 8. And I've made sure that every week there's a woman that's represented in this Padlet. And I've also done things about privilege. And this week there's the Chadwick Boseman's speech that he gave to Howard University is on it. So just having these things available for kids to be able to access. And I thought that I would have people contacting me and giving me a hard time. Nope, I'm not. So I just wanted to let you know that that's an influence that I think from this group has kind of raised my awareness to make sure that I included that.
That's awesome. You guys are making me feel like I'm gonna cry. I'm so excited about like all the stuff that you guys are doing, and just knowing that I'm, a part of this journey with you. I feel pretty special right now. So thank you guys. What I'm gonna do now is just go through section 2 of our.
Kayla,
Yeah.
I think Pam has a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't even realize. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good.
No, it's not a question. I just wanted to say I am a former employee of the state of Connecticut at Connecticut Valley Hospital psychiatric facility. And we had a program called Healing Racism, and I was quite shocked. We did a similar line, and I was quite shocked because I grew up, we had enough, but we weren't rich or anything, but I was really shocked at how much farther I was advanced than some other people. It just really shocked me. So that has been going on in Connecticut in some places. And I would say that was 8 or 10 years ago.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. Those East Coast activists, man, they're on the ball. I just need to come out there. You guys really seem to be advanced in your approach to conversations about race. And I really appreciate that. So that is exciting. Let me make sure no one else has a question before I launch into anything else. Are we all good? Okay. So the statement that we have, I think I need to share my screen again. 1 second. Statement that we have starts with, we recognize that the death of George Floyd, like so many others, was caused by police brutality. We are going to add in Breonna Taylor there. I think we can all agree on that. Is there any other corrections to that sentence that you guys are thinking of? If not, we can move to the next one. I think that this section is a lot less controversial than last month. I think you guys will ease into this one a little bit better. So the next part is, watching the traumatic video as it circulated over our social networks, we realized as Christians, we could no longer sit idly by. It is our duty to create change. We could maybe flesh out the details, say it's not only just what we saw on our social networks, but it's what we witnessed in our community. It's what we saw on the news and things like that. So we can really flesh out that it wasn't just social media that made you guys feel like you need.
And I think editing the language of this sentence too is necessary, because when we say watching the traumatic video is focusing in on just George Floyd's experience, and there was no video of Breonna Taylor either. So there's, I think, a little bit of a more broad stroke would do that sentence well.
Definitely. And so our next section, taking action looks differently for all of us. Some stand on the front lines of protests, others provide education on racist systems. Many donate to causes working toward change. Voting is also an opportunity to affect systemic change. These are all great examples of things that affect change. Do we have any debates on those sentences? All right.
Should we add something like, we can all do something, or something like that?
I can totally do that. There's an opportunity for everyone to do something. I think that it is important to find our lane in activism and do something. I can definitely add that sentence of encouragement that you can do it too. We can all do something would be great here. So to help us find our lane, our congregation's leadership will devote time and resources to community conversations on race and privilege within our own organization and lives. You guys haven't even officially put this statement out, and you're already doing this. So that's amazing. And whenever you are ready to open this up to a grander audience, I would be more than happy to help. And yeah, is there any debates on that part of the statement?
I just have a question, Arkayla.
Yes.
You know, in the newsletter that I printed out, along the side, you know, like there's like, let's get started, and I thought that was like part of our our statement. First and foremost, we want to recognize the emotional and spiritual weight. Is that part of the statement, or what was this that, you know, the next section was keep going, and then the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that was from the original statement that I worked with you guys to write at first.
Okay.
Those are bits and pieces of that. And as our final meeting for this, we'll be looking at the entire statement with all the notes that I've taken and rewriting it together. And then you guys see the final product after, you know, all the experiences that we've had and after the conversations and the wordsmithing that we've done. You guys will get a final version of the statement. That's
Right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no
Pam,
problem.
go ahead.
It just seems like the statement is so limiting that the scope of how many people have died and been brutalized is not really powerfully reflected.
Okay.
I don't know if there's another way to make it more punch or help me.
It's limiting to 2 scenarios, and there really are different scenarios. You go to Ray Sean Jones, for example, or others that you know, they're different. There are some common threads behind there show that there's a systemic issue, but there's also some individual issues, and it goes back into the intersectionality. That there are some common threads, but there are other issues that intersect in there in the different scenarios.
Yeah.
Perhaps including something about hundreds of people have lost their lives just in this year or something.
Yeah. Naming those 2, and then perhaps an anecdote about how, you know, there are more than just those 2, or many more.
The woman who supposedly committed suicide in jail, I don't believe it, for a traffic stop.
Yeah, Sandra Bland, I
I
believe.
can't think of her name.
In Dallas.
I had just a question. I know because we're talking about lanes in our discernment. I like the fact that this says find our lane, but does anybody feel like there would be any confusion or whatever controversy because of?
Could we put?
Yeah, I think path would do
Or
for that.
something.
I think you're right. Delineating that language is important for us.
Or our roles in activism. What is our role in activism?
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
definitely had that. Your role, your path. When I think of like your path in activism, I think of like my life path and how it is tied to activism and things like that. So I can imagine putting some of those types of terms into it. I do appreciate that.
And I think it's smart to get that word lane out of there. It's in 2 places.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just to help delineate between the efforts that are going on.
Okay. Definitely.
Arkayla, I don't know if you're aware of what context we're talking about lanes in. We're going through a discernment process with the church to kind of talk about the church's future as an institution, as an organization, and the term lane has kind of been presented as, you know, do we choose revitalization or various other lanes forward that we have? So that's kind of where we're coming from with that.
Okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification. Because I was just like, I don't exactly know why they're so opposed to this word, but
no, that's why. Okay, just a delineation between the 2 programs that we're working on, this one and then that effort as well.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I can switch those out. And I think that is all I have for you guys. And we did it in exactly an hour, which is always exciting. I love when I can keep time limits together. Did you guys have any questions, requests of me, anything like that? I thank you guys as usual, just for the opportunity to talk with you. It's football Sunday, so I know some of you guys got to get to the game, but and I understand that. So I just, taking an hour of your week to talk to me, I feel really special that you guys will listen to me talk to you for an hour. Not many people will do that. They're like, oh my gosh, girl, shut up. But I'm very excited that you guys let me present this information to you.
As soon as you-
Pam, go ahead.
When you do your newsletter, if you could include a bibliography of materials that are good, like Maureen showed us some titles of some books that are good to read, but maybe you have some articles or particularly we're all kind of busy sometimes, and an article over a book. I love reading a book, but I don't necessarily take the time to read a whole book. If you have some quick articles and things like that to enrich our discussion and our discernment process, thinking process.
Definitely.
I have a social justice library that I can in my office, so I can also.
Anyone
contribute
else?
Well, tell them that.
Oh, okay. No, I have a social justice library in my office here. Social justice is one of my concentrations in my doctorate. So, and I'm working on the agenda right now for one of the UN NGOs meetings in November, which is on social justice and the common good in a global economy.
Awesome. Yeah, if you've got favorites from that library, feel free to send it along to us. That'd be great.
I would be really interested in seeing what you have in that library. And like you said, Pam, we don't always have time to read a whole book, but just knowing that you're helping with that meeting and things like that, as you guys have materials out, I would be really interested in seeing how you market the meeting that you're having and just kind of the terminology you use and things like that. So I would love to connect with you on that if you're open to it. Thank you for mentioning that.
Arkayla, just a question. Have you read the book Ferguson's Fault Lines?
No, I have not.
Yeah. I have an extra copy. I'll send it to you. That's a really good one that it's like a compilation of several essays on the government in St. Louis and how the system is really set up there. It's a phenomenal read. It's a couple years old, written in the context of Michael Brown, but it's really good.
Yeah, looking into the history of the setup of the city of St. Louis, I did a whole training on it.
Yeah.
They set it up for Black people to fail in every way across the city and the county.
Yeah. That racism is strongly embedded in that structure.
Yes. And yes, St. Louis is kind of an epicenter for race relations, I would say. And I'm actually, so I don't know if you guys know, I live outside of the city, but next week I'm actually moving downtown St. Louis. So I will be at the heart of everything.
What part of the city are you moving into?
So I'll be moving in, do you know where the Fox Theater is?
Yes. Oh, right there.
Across the street.
Wow.
Right across the street from the Fox Theater.
Nice.
So, yes. So it is going to be really interesting being in the center of the city.
Right in the thick of it.
Right in the thick of it. I'm interested on how election night's going to go and things of that nature. Sorry, I just looked over. There's the biggest bug I've ever seen in my entire life over here. That is okay because I'm going to keep calm and not scream. But I'm going to let you guys go because we went over our hour. And thank you guys again. And I will get that newsletter out to you by next Sunday.
Thank you very much, Arkayla. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Stay safe.
Yeah, be safe.
Thank you.
All right, Arkayla, thank you so much. We're looking forward to our next session.
All right, thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So friends, if we want to take a little bit of time, if there's anything that we'd like to debrief as a group, any reflections or any thoughts, this would be a great time to do that.
I don't know. Am I muted?
No,
No.
you're just fine.
I appreciate that we're doing something. I remember being just horrified when Michael Brown was killed and seeing all. It looked like war, and with the armored personnel carriers and the police dressed for war, it just horrified me, and I felt helpless that there was nothing I could do about that. So at least beginning to talk about it and maybe providing ways that we can in some small way change
Yeah.
things.
And Pam, you're absolutely right about that. The sense of helplessness, I think, is shared by this group and by a lot of people as well. You know, the question of what can we do is often so difficult to answer, because we immediately jump to, how do we stop that militarization, that image that's presented on our TV? And I think this especially has been a good reinforcement of the learning that we don't have to jump immediately to that. If that's not where our wheelhouse is, we can find something that's unique to our community, that's still effective. You know, the moving of money is one thing that I think our church can do really well. That our church already does really well at, is moving money in the direction of causes. So that's something I think that you're absolutely right. You know, the what can we do? We often think about, you know, we jump to the big things and then we're just kind of like looking up at a mountain, but, you know, taking the steps and finding our own path, you know, is something that I think this has really helped me kind of reinforce too. Is that it's not, you know, jumping, you know, you're not doing the shoe leather, beating the streets type of thing all the time. That's not the only form, but there are so many different forms. And even just talking about it is activism.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that reinforcement, because sometimes I feel like, oh, just talking about it, you know.
It's tough. And, you know, it's tough too, because there's some that have the expectation that if you're not doing this, that your whatever your path is almost invalid. But that's an unhelpful point of view on activism, is that certain paths are valid and certain are not. I think every step in the right direction is valid. You know, and like I preached about today, so long as you're doing the work, even if it's just the internal contemplation, that is work. That's work enough.
Yes.
That's worth that end of the day's denarian, that the people that have been working on it since 9 a.m. that are out in the same street, that we're all looking for that same end result. We're just doing it in different ways. We're putting a different kind of amount of work in, but it's all towards that same goal of producing this fruit of racial equality, racial justice, and we're doing it in different ways.
By you doing the work of the reflection, as Barbara put it so well, you don't know who you're going to be. I think it helps you be a better role model, and you don't know who you are influencing. It might be your grandchildren. It might be the little kid in the neighbor.
Absolutely.
Somebody in the grocery store. Who knows who you're influencing by doing that reflection and realizing, you know, that things have to change.
I look at our mission with, with Dots Place. You know, some people say, well, what are you really doing for families in crisis, particularly those of domestic abuse? We have one apartment. We're helping one person. But you never know who that one person is. I am still a believer that if the right person, if the right thing had happened for Adam Lanza, Sandy Hook could have been avoided. Just something that made a difference for that one child in his life, and all those other lives could have been saved. It's the analogy of throwing the pebble into the pond, and you don't know where the ripples are going to touch when they hit shore.
Yeah.
And I say, we're changing lives one family at a time. You just don't know what repercussions that will have, but I do believe it makes a difference.
Yeah. And that's absolutely right, Barbara. That ties into the proverb that was presented in the Ezekiel text that we looked at this morning, talking about the sour grapes and how, you know, the consumption of one generation's sour grapes will lead to, you know, the generations, the next generation suffering. And while, you know, that generation shouldn't necessarily just wallow in their victimhood, they should do something about it. There's absolutely a truth to that there is something that we can do to influence the next generation, and that the what is passed down, what is shared with the present day young generation will absolutely have ripple effects from then on.
Mhm.
I like
We were talking
Go ahead.
about this morning that the song "You Have to Be Taught, You Have to Be Carefully Taught" from South Pacific, about you have to be taught to be a racist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I've always
That's what your
said, oh, go ahead, Pam.
I was going to say that's what your sermon inspired this morning, Connor.
Awesome.
And, I've always said when you have a big task in front of you, you have to remember that the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So you just have to pick your bite and jump in and just start biting and eating. And if you stick with it, eventually you'll eat that whole elephant. But if you try to eat the whole elephant at once, you're going to fail. So.
And one of the things that comes out of today's sermon message too is the idea, and I think I've talked about it before, the idea that there's grace in good enough, there's grace in what you can do, and so long as you are doing what you can do, there's grace in that. You don't have to be, it's those leaders and loudest voices. You can be doing the best that you can, so long as you know that that's the best you can do. There's grace in that, absolutely. And that kind of, I think, mirrors that one bite at a time image as well.
Yeah. Or as Voltaire puts it, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Strive for the good, not for the perfect.
Wow. I'll write that one down. You said Voltaire?
Yeah.
Getting pretty deep here.
Now,
He's got a million of them, Connor.
Now, leave it to Steve to talk about Voltaire, and I'm talking about eating elephants,
Wow.
Particularly at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Is there anyone else that has something they want to share? If not, there's again, the inner contemplation is a lot of the work itself. If there is any thoughts that bubble up afterwards, feel free to email me, call me. I'm more than willing to have the conversation too, because that's a really helpful thing too, is to be able to bounce the thoughts, the ideas, the feelings that we have off of someone else, to be able to flesh them out, be able to kind of string them out and see them out in front of you as well. And I'm more than willing to be that resource for you all to kind of have those conversations that you might not be comfortable with in a group, but that if one-on-one with me would help, I'm more than willing to have those conversations. All right, friends. I think we're feeling a natural stopping point. So thank you all again for coming and doing the work as we can. So that's I think that feels like the message of the day is knowing better and doing better. And we're expressing that we're knowing better by doing this work, by attending, by engaging, and by kind of bringing the self-reflection piece into it. So I'm again want to restate how thankful I am for everybody participating and for doing that work, because that's a real source of both pride about the church that I work for, and that there are people here that understand that there is something wrong and that they are exploring what they can do. And if there's ever if there's ever a goal for pastors in the work that they want to see their church doing, it's in that work exactly, is that they recognize that there's something wrong and that they want to know how they can do something, whether it's that one bite or whether it's something big. That doesn't matter. You know, as the work, the parable of the vineyard workers says, you know, it's not about who's putting in the large body of work or who's putting in the small body of work, but as long as the work of producing good fruit is done in some way, that's ultimately what matters. And that's exactly what I see going on here in these meetings, is that work being done. So I'm immensely proud of you and immensely thankful for you.
And we feel the same way about you, Connor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Well, friends, thank you so much. If y'all haven't eaten lunch, go do that. Go relax. Enjoy the Sunday. I think I see the sun poking out. Joan, it looks like you've got a good weather day there.
It's beautiful.
All righty, friends. We will see you around. Thank you so much again.